What's up? Inside Out. Decatur. Where is greater? So I'm super excited to be here with y'all. My name is Krystal Cox, for those of you who do not know. I am from Cali, so I do have a few people in here that call me Cali. I don't know where those ladies are. I think I see them somewhere in the back. But this week, we are in week 4 of our series called Young. And in this week in specific, we're going to be talking about faith. But before you all go check out, because you're like, I got faith, or I don't have faith, and I really don't care about it, I think it's important for us to talk about faith. Because whether we want to believe it or not, whether we're Christian in the room or we're not, I believe we all put our faith in something. Isn't it true that before you go buy whatever product that you like, you review it first online to see what people are saying about it, to see if it's something that's actually good, or maybe you even ask your friend about it? Who knows about Fortnite in here? I don't know how y'all do that dance, but Fortnite, for instance, before you ever played the game, before you ever had it in your possession, you heard about it. You heard how tight that game was, and you just knew you had to have it. Or maybe your friends told you all about it. But before you could ever review the game for yourself, you had others review it for you. Or maybe games, Fortnite is just not your thing. Maybe yours, and this is probably a long stretch, maybe it's you have a crush at school. That guy, that girl that you're crushing on. And before you ever even say hi to this person, you send all of your friends to go check this person out. They pretty much stalk this person, okay? They check him out on Instagram, check him out on Facebook, follow him or her on Snapchat, just to see if this person is someone that you can even be compatible with, someone that you could even possibly go to the dance with. Or maybe some of you are like, nah, girls got cooties, or guys got cooties. Oh, there we go. Yes. So you're like, I'm not into that. I'm all about my education, and I'm just here so that I can get to college. So, Fortnite and maybe a girlfriend or a boyfriend is not your thing, but maybe it's movies. When a movie come out, you usually look at all the trailers, look at all the commercials, or maybe even look online at some of the reviews that it has to see if it's going to be a good movie. And I believe that everybody in this room went to see the same movie at the same time will have mixed reviews. Some people will love it, and some people will hate it. And then there'll be people that are in between. And that's me, because I don't really like movies that much, so I'm always like that in-between person. But isn't it true that we can all go to the same place at the same time and watch the same thing with our own 2 eyes and come out with something different? I think that that's true about God. I think he thinks the same thing. Because when God looks at the world, or even when he looks at us, his thoughts about us sometimes are different than our thoughts about us. Because there's a way that people see things, and then there's a way that God sees things. Isn't it true that when you're talking about yourself, you're always like, oh man, you're so negative, like, today's just not my day. I don't look good. My hair is not laying down how I want to. Mine really is not laying down how I want to. But I don't look good. I'm not worthy enough. I'm not strong enough to make that team. I'm not good enough to get into that AP class. I just don't have what it takes. But then when God looks at you, he's like, yeah, you do have what it takes. You are worthy enough. You are good enough. You are pretty enough. You are smart enough, because I took time to create you. Or maybe people have an expectation of what Inside Out at Decatur should be like or should look like. But when God looks at Inside Out at Decatur, he looks at all the potential that it does have. And I think that sometimes our review of God, or review of ourselves and God's review about the world or ourselves, becomes so different. And I believe that's where we fall in the gap of this right here. God's dreams and our expectations. I believe sometimes we sit and plan our lives. We come up with all our dreams. How many of you going to college? Want to go to college? Okay, some of you are like, I'm done with school once I'm done with this. So when you have your plans, you have your dreams, right? You have things figured out. And a lot of times we want to invite God into that space. God, here are my dreams. Here are my plans. Now I want you to take hold of these things. I want you to review everything and tell me that it's all good and everything's going to work out exactly how I planned it. I don't want you to do anything with them. I want it to be just like this. But have we ever took the time to really be like, God, no, how can you fit me in your big dreams? How can you fit me in your big plans? What do you have for me? But a lot of times we miss God's plans and dreams for us, and we just settle for our expectations. And I think the reason why we settle for our own expectations is because God's dreams and plans for us require something. And none of us like for anything to be required of us. We want to be the shot. We want to call the shots. We want to say what we want to do. But God's dreams and plans for us require something. And that's what we're talking about today. And that's this right here. Faith. Just as simple as that. Faith is basically trusting God that he's going to do exactly what he says that he's going to do. And living out in a way that, God, although I don't know what's up the corner, although I don't know what's down the street, putting my faith in God is saying, oh, I trust you for whatever that is. I trust you for whatever your plan or dreams are for me. But I think sometimes we struggle with that idea of faith. We struggle with knowing what he wants. And some of you are probably in here like, Krystal, like, okay, but like, put that in a way that I'll understand that. How do I live out faith? How do I live out my faith? And sometimes we think of it as something so deep, but it really could be as simple as wearing your InsideOut gear to school. Maybe if you don't wear a uniform to school, wear your InsideOut gear to school, and when your friends ask you about your cool swag, you're confident enough to say, oh, I got this from my church group. You should come sometime. Because that actually takes faith. Or maybe it's saying no to that thing that you do often that is not good, or hanging around those friends that gossip about people all the time, or hanging around those friends that want to do drugs or drink all the time, but actually saying, hey, no, I'm not going to do that because I actually want to see what this walk with God actually looks like. And that right there, it actually takes faith to say no. And it takes faith to just trust God like, oh, God, I'm saying no to this, but I hope you have my back. It's not just I hope you have my back, but I know that you have my back. So even when the friends that I thought were my friends leave me because I said no to gossiping and I said no to drugs, that I know that you are there for me. I know that you got me. And maybe that's not your thing. Or maybe it's hanging out with someone who's been sitting at the lunch table by themselves. Maybe you hear people talking about race all the time and making these hurtful jokes to people. Maybe it's you being a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. You're not joining in on those jokes, but instead you're standing up and saying, hey, let's not talk like that. That's not kind. That's not nice. And you know what? High school students, that right there takes faith. Or maybe, just maybe, you're here right now and you know what Jesus has done in your life. And so you want to create a space here in Decatur City where a place where people who may not know Jesus can come and belong. And you're like, I'm going to do whatever I can so that I could show people the love of Christ. And you know what? That takes faith. That a 14 or 18-year-old is going to come in to really set the tone. I don't think God is looking for extraordinary young people. I think God is looking for ordinary young people who will put their faith in an extraordinary God to say, although I don't know what you have in store for me or for them, God, I'm going to trust you anyway. God doesn't need you to do anything else but to put your faith in him. So if you're going to be an I got now generation of young people, you're going to have to lead instead of follow. You're going to have to be the example, and all that takes is a step of faith. This summer, we've been talking about this verse or this letter that our good friend Paul wrote to Timothy, and I believe that every single one of us, I'm 27 years old, but I think it still applies to me. Am I still young? So I think it still applies to every single one in this room, and that's this right here. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. but set an example for the believers in speech, conduct, love, what we're talking about this morning, faith, and purity. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. What are you going to do? Are you going to choose to set the stone and be the example? Or are you going to choose to just do whatever you want and just figure out the rest later? But I think the story of these 12 spies could really help us take that step into faith. These 12 spies could really help us take that next step into faith. And basically the story goes like this. God raises up this leader named Moses. He frees these people from Egypt that were in slavery for so many years. Some of you who have been to church and heard this story know exactly what I'm talking about. But others of you, you may not know yet, but I'm going to bring it to you right now. He frees these people from Egypt, and God promises them this land. This land, for some of you, you may know it as the Promised Land. And for others who may not know what the Promised Land is like, I would say it's like our day and age Disney World. I would say that this land that God promised them was something that they never even had before. And so before Moses took the people over there into the Promised Land, he sent 12 of his friends in there. And 12 of these guys were called spies. So basically they were undercover and they were just checking out the land, checking out everything just to see how it was going to be. And so the 12 go over there to this land. They're checking out. They're like, oh my gosh, it's so dope over here. I just want to stay. Can we just never go back? Do we have to go back and tell them what we reviewed? But just like I said earlier, all 12 of them went to the same place at the same time, looked at the same things, but came back with a different review. 10 out of the 12 spies went and told Moses that there's no way that we can go over there and conquer that land. There's no way that we can go over there and defeat those giants that are over there that are occupying that land or tear down those walls. There's just absolutely no way that we can do that. But then there was two. And these two were named Joshua and Caleb. And they thought something different. And this is where we pick up in the story, right here in Numbers 13 and 30. But Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. Let's go at once to take the land, he said. We can certainly conquer it. You see, Joshua and Caleb saw what God saw. They weren't looking at their circumstances. They literally said, God, you promised us this land. You promised us Disney World, so we're going to go over there and take it. We're not waiting. But then the 10 came beside them and said, there's absolutely no way that we can do that. Did you see those people over there? They are massive. Did you see those walls? Did you see the armies? There's no way that we're going to be able to enter into that land. And then something dawned on me as I was reading this. And the question that came to me was, why were the two, Joshua and Caleb, so confident, but the 10, the other spies, so afraid? Why were the two out of the 12 so confident and the other 10 so afraid? And we see it in this next verse. The 10 goes to say, we even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them, we felt like grasshoppers, and they thought so too. You see, the 10 were speaking from their perspective, kind of like how you and I do. When we don't think we're good enough, when we don't think we look good enough, we talk about what we can see with our visual eyes. And they were talking about all the things that they saw, and they were saying, next to them, we felt like grasshoppers, and they thought so too. That's kind of odd to me, because if they went into the land as spies, then that means they were undercover. So do you think they talked to anybody? No. So that means they're talking from their perspective when they say they thought so too. And that's what they thought. No, that's what they wanted to believe. But I think that God is saying something different here. And I think the problem is when we look at things like this, when we look at Joshua and Caleb, and then we look at the 10 who felt defeat, we fall into this problem. Fear paralyzes our faith. God set it all up for them. He rescued them from Egypt. He parted the Red Sea. He got them to the very boundary of the promise that he was given to them, which was the promised land. And they were stopped in their tracks. They were afraid because they didn't think that they could have what God was giving them. And I don't know, maybe some of you are afraid. And I'm just curious, what is stopping you in your tracks? What giants are in the way of you taking that step of faith? And sometimes it's our own personal insecurity. And sometimes it's what we believe about ourselves, or maybe it's even the dysfunction in our own homes. I don't know what you guys are experiencing or you ladies are experiencing, but there's something that you wrestle with day by day and night by night. No one sees you crying. No one sees you hurting because you've done a good thing by covering it up. But what giants are in the way of you taking that step in faith? And you may be thinking, well, Krystal, that's a pretty great movie that you just said over there. That's really awesome and great how you put that together, but what does that have to do with me? What does this all have to do with me? And I remember when I was just graduated high school and went off to college, I had this professor in my biology class. On my very first test, I got a B minus. A B minus. Some of y'all like, that's pretty good. That's okay. But in college, in this class, like if you are not getting like A's, like there's no way you're gonna make it. So I went to my professor and I said, hey, if I got a B minus on this test, do you think that I'll be able to pass your class? And he looks at me. He goes, no, I think you should change your major. There's no way that if you got a B minus on the first test that you're gonna do any better than that on the next test, because it only gets harder from here. So I walked out of his office in defeat. Like, everything that I worked for, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. And so I did what any, teenager, I think I was a teenager at the time, yes, I was 18, teenager would do. I called my grandma, and I said, Grandma, with tears in my eyes, Grandma, my professor said that I need to just drop out because I'm not gonna make it. And she said, do you believe what your professor says, or do you believe what God says? She said, because it sounds like you start to get down on yourself because you believe what your professor said about you. But I believe you are smart enough. And I believe that you are good enough. And I took those words that my grandma told me, and I went back into that class, and I said, I'm going to do it. So I went back in that class. I studied my butt off. I did everything that I can, and you know what happened? I walked out of that class with an A. So it's all about what we tell ourselves. And I share that with you because I think that God is looking for a generation of young people who is willing to look past their circumstances and to say, although I don't know how this is going to work out, I trust in you. And so it looks like this. Don't just tell God how big your circumstances are. Tell your circumstances how big your God is. Because that, freshmen in the room, sophomore, junior, seniors in the room, even leaders in the room, that right there takes faith. So when I walked into that classroom after that teacher told me that I should quit, I took this with me. I told my circumstances. But that it didn't just happen overnight. I had to study really hard. So yours may not look like mine. But whatever yours look like, just know that God is not looking for you to do what he did. He's not looking for you to slay giants and knock down walls and defeat armies to possess the land. He's just looking for a generation that would say, hey, God, use me. I want to put my faith in you. So if you don't get anything from this talk, if you don't get anything from faith before you go back into your small group, I want you to think about this bottom line. God is looking for a generation that is more impressed with the God they are following than the giants that they are facing. God is looking for a generation of young people, including me, that's more impressed with the God they are following than the giants that they are facing. So which one are you? Are you gonna be like Joshua and Caleb, the two spies, that although they had all these crazy circumstances, but they saw the victory on the other side? Or are you gonna be like the 10 other spies who are defeated by what they see? And I'm gonna be a spoiler alert. If you wanna read more about this, it's gonna be found in Joshua. But Joshua and Caleb got to conquer the land. They got to watch God knock down those armies, slay those giants, break down all the walls, and they were able to possess the very land that God has given them. So which one are you gonna be? And before you go to small group, I think there's two things that we can learn from Joshua and Caleb. If you're struggling with what it looks like to walk faith out in your life, I think you could take hold or take heed to these two things. And the first one is this: speak out. Joshua and Caleb, although their other friends were saying something different, Joshua and Caleb said, hey, I think we most certainly can conquer that land. And sometimes all it takes is young people like you to say, hey, I think we can do it. And when you believe in what you're saying, other people are just gonna follow. And the last one is this: step out. Caleb and Joshua ended up getting the land. And stepping out in faith is something that takes an action step. Even though you don't know what's on the other side, even though you don't know what is going to happen next, the action step is just take it, even though you can't see it. And trust that as you're getting yourself in the game, that God is going to use not just them, not just that smart girl or guy or that strong guy or that person that just has it or seems like they have it all together, but that God thought enough to use you. So taking that step out is trusting that God has a plan for you. And so I hope that you can use that in your small groups, and I hope you have real conversations. Let us pray. Dad, thank you so much for this time with these InsideOut students. Thank you so much for faith. Whether students are struggling with their faith, whether they are walking in their faith, or whether they're just in that unknown place they don't know. God, I ask that you would allow them to have real conversations and to ask real questions in their small groups so that they won't leave this place the same way that they came, but that they will leave this place knowing a little more about you. And not just knowing a little bit more about you, but learning a little bit more about the people that they're doing life with in their small group, so that we can all be better together. Allow us to be like Joshua and Caleb. Allow us not to be defined by our giants or our circumstances, but allow us to be defined by the things you want to define us as. That is worthy, and that's good enough, and that's beautiful and excellent, all of those great things, God. And so I thank you for what you're working right now in this room, and I thank you for what you're going to do. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. You all are dismissed for a small group. I would love to get to know y'all, would love to know y'all by name in the next couple of weeks. So come stop and talk to me and hang out with me, and we go from there. Thank you. See ya.